Welcome everyone to the Hired&Co resume program. We're here today talking about resumes, what you can do to effectively make a resume and get into a Fortune 500 company, Fortune 100 company. Perhaps you've been out there for some time trying to apply for positions. Maybe you're in a position right now trying to transfer into a new position. Perhaps you're in between positions. Wherever you're at, we're here to help you. And in this program, I'm going to go into more than likely a lot of things that you've never heard of when it comes to creating a resume, structuring a resume. A lot of people have asked us, what is your track record in getting candidates excellent resumes and getting into Fortune 100 companies? Well, we've gotten people into Amazon, Nestle Purina, Williams-Sonoma, just to name a few. And our resumes are very carefully done, and that's the first thing I'm going to impress upon you is make sure that if you're in the process of making a resume, you really need to be careful about doing a great job on this because a lot of importance rests on this single document in the hiring process. So we've also sat down, and you may be familiar with our Fortune 100 program. That's another program that we do. That's where we sat down with Fortune 100 hiring managers, directors, vice presidents, a lot of different people at Fortune 100 companies. So we actually sat down with a lot of these directors and we asked them specifically what they look for in a resume. So we're talking about Nestle Purina, we're talking about Morgan Stanley, and we've sat down with a lot of other people, just as many people off camera as we have on camera in that series. And we've also looked at their resumes. Whenever we sit down with a vice president or hiring manager from a Fortune 100 company, we look at their resume and we say, listen, what are they doing in this resume that's gotten them in the door at this particular company? So the key here is modeling what does work. And just to get started here, I want to share with you why the resume is so important. And I'll go into about 3 to 5 different things here, but these are really important. And when I start off with whether we go to a university and talk to a business school, or we sit down with a client one-on-one, we really don't do this that much anymore just because we don't have the time. But what we do is go into what I call the ATS. And we go over this in detail. You may know what this is, but more than likely you've probably never heard of this. And what this is called, what this acronym stands for, is the Applicant Tracking System. Now, if you're wondering what this is, I'll explain it to you. So, Fortune 500 companies now, because we're in such a technologically advanced society run by computers, companies like Boeing, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Hershey, Mars, any of these companies, and this includes your Facebook, Google's, Oracle, Salesforce, they're using an applicant tracking system. So whenever you apply to their company, they save your profile, your name, address, your resume, all of the questions that you've answered during that application into their system. It's basically a large database that they have that's filled with resumes, in addition to applications for every candidate. So if you submit an application early on in your job search to, let's say, Salesforce, and you sit there and say, well, I really need to redo my resume. 3 weeks later, I didn't get any responses from candidates. I'm going to redo my resume now, and I'm going to send it back into Salesforce and see if I get a response now. What happens is they're going to go back and compare your original resume to your new resume. And if they see a big difference, if you've got a great resume now and your resume before wasn't that great, they're going to take notice of it and say, well, why is there such a big difference in this candidate and what they're showing us now versus what they've shown us 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago. So you really want to start off with a great resume for consistency's sake. You don't want to have a lot of different changes taking place in what you're submitting to each of these companies when you're applying out there. So just getting back to the applicant tracking system, the ATS, the way that this works, and I'll do some illustrations here. Let's just say that this is a job candidate right here. And you know what? I'm going to go to the next page because I'm going to need more space than this. But just to continue describing what this ATS is we've got a candidate here, and they're on their laptop. And what happens is when they send in a resume for a job through a corporate website, through LinkedIn, it's going to go like this. It's going to hit the ATS system at Salesforce, let's say. So Salesforce's ATS. And what happens is if your resume is made right, it's structured right, it's got the right layouts, and it's been done correctly, the ATS is going to send this resume up to a recruiter or hiring manager that's on their laptop. Now, if the resume sent into the ATS is not approved and it is not made according to the conditions that this hiring manager set for this particular position and job requisition, what happens is the ATS is going to send this into the recycle bin. And that's where 75% of resumes that are submitted through corporate websites, through LinkedIn, places like Indeed end up going, is directly into the trash can. They never get read by a recruiter or hiring manager. Only 25% of resumes ever make it past the applicant tracking system. Now, this applicant tracking system, like I said, is at every company. Everyone has one. They just don't have the time anymore. People ask me, why do they do this? They just don't have the time anymore to go through, like Google, 3 million resumes in a year by hand. Every recruiter at Google has to look through so many resumes there. If they were to take that 3 million applications that they receive every year and divide that up amongst their recruiters, each recruiter would be looking at about 30,000 resumes a year. So these applicant tracking systems really help your recruiters to filter through the masses of people that are applying annually to their companies. Now, you're probably saying, well, that's not good for me as a candidate. I want to get directly through to the hiring manager and be a part of the 25% that actually get through and get read by a human. So I just want to take a step back before I go any further on this. This is what we help candidates do when it comes to our resumes. We are very careful with the structure, the layout, the content, which I'll get a little bit more into, and just making these stand out. You really want to have a differentiated resume that you're sending in. You do not want to be like the masses who are sending in generic resumes that don't stand out, that are perhaps irrelevant to the position, to these companies, because they're just going to go straight into the digital wastebasket. Now, a lot of people say, well, how do I get past the applicant tracking system? It really comes down to having a great resume, and that's really what we help candidates do. So I want to go into some steps here that are really going to help you when it comes to your resume. And if maybe you know a lot about resumes, I continue to implore upon people, take notes, get to a quiet place. I wish I would have said this earlier in the beginning. Take some notes, or if you're going to have to come back later because you don't have a lot of time right now and you're not in a quiet space, maybe you're seeing this at work, check out this video at night, get to your office or a place in your home where you can actually dedicate the time to sit down and absorb the knowledge that we're going through here, because this is something we typically charge for. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this, so I would encourage you to do that. with that being said, let me just jump right into it and talk about this, and that's resume templates. This is the big thing that's popped up on the internet over the past, I want to say the last 4 or 5 years, is there's a lot of generic templates out there. We could even say, I'll just throw in generic. They're all over the internet. There's even resumes out there that you can download that are more position targeted or industry related, and people will go in there and they'll copy the bullet points, they'll copy the structure, or they'll use the resume template on xyzresumes.com. This is a way to set yourself up for failure from the very beginning. If you're using something that mass amounts of people are using, then you're going to look like the 75% of people that are sending resumes into these companies that are getting filtered out by the ATS systems. Now, this and it also screens out a lot of things that are found on the internet commonly. It filters out spelling. If you're wondering, it filters out spelling errors, resumes that have spelling errors or things that can't be read clearly. It just filters them right out. So I would encourage you not to use a resume template. Do not use a generic template. It's just going to make you look like everybody else out there. And if we were to just write this bullet point a different way, it would be to differentiate your resume. Differentiate your resume. You don't want to look like everybody else out there. You don't want to look like the masses of people that are applying to these companies. And ask yourself, how many people use this generic resume that's out there? Chances are, if it looks like everybody else's resume, it's really not going to help you that much. So the resumes that actually get through, the 25% that get through to the hiring manager, of that 25, they're going to be picking out the one that has the best content, that's the best written, and the person who has the best accomplishments that fit to that particular position. So you really want to be careful in terms of how you're structuring your resume. And I recommend sitting down in the very beginning and working with a company to do this, working with an expert. And a lot of people say, well, why? And the story or the analogy that I use is, let's say for a minute that you're pregnant or your wife is pregnant. If you're not at that stage in your life, if you just got out of college, just humor me for a minute here. But who are you going to go see when it's time to deliver the baby? Are you going to do this yourself? And then some people do it themselves. Or are you going to go to a hospital and see a doctor in a maternity ward? Most people elect to go to a doctor because they're just not skilled in that. They're just not trained in that. They don't know how to deliver a baby, and there's different elements that really have to be watched carefully when you're delivering a baby. So in much the same way, when you're talking about a resume, we talk to engineers, we get directors, VPs of marketing, CEOs calling into us to handle this type of thing for them because they just don't specialize in resume writing. And because this is such an important part of their life, for some people their careers are their whole life, or their careers put the food on the table, so to speak, for that baby, they want to be really careful about creating their resume for maximum effectiveness so that they can continue to scale in their career and get to that next level. Now, I want to just touch on something here. This would be number 2. And this is a tip that I share with everyone who I connect with in person. And it's really important. And I know it'll help you. And so And here's what it is don't start applying until you perfect your resume. Now, that's going to be hard for a lot of people to initially swallow, so let me just break it down to you why I say do not start applying until you perfect your resume. You don't want to get out there with a sloppy resume or one that's just kind of half put together or even mediocre, average. Because what's going to happen is there's too many people who we speak with and they want to get out there, they're very excited to get to a new place in their career, get that new position, they want to start interviewing right away. And the thing is, a lot of people are really enthusiastic, they're really geared up and engaged to start that, and they get out with a mediocre resume, and what happens is they end up expending all of this energy applying to all of these different companies, anywhere from 50 to 100 companies. They're on the computer for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time, which I don't recommend doing. You want to be very deliberate about how you're going through and spending your time each day. It's better to pace yourself to run that marathon as opposed to using all your energy on the first mile. And it takes, on average, 4 to 6 months for most people to get to a new position. That's the statistic. That's the average. So you want to start applying when you've got something that's worth its weight in gold. And that way, all of your energy, which is your valuable resources, are being well spent sending out a resume to companies like Nestle or Purina or Anheuser-Busch, Miller, Coors, IBM, whoever it happens to be. You're sending a solid resume that you know is going to get, you're planting seeds essentially, and so you want those seeds to harvest that come back. There's too many people that we've spoke with who've called us after 4 months. I've hardly gotten any response. I'm trying to figure this out. I don't have the experience in this area is what we hear a lot. I need help. So I would encourage you to get help in this area. And you want to start from the very beginning on your absolute best foot. Not only because your energy is precious and vital and you want to make the most out of every application you're submitting, but also because if you're sending dud resumes out, sometimes what I'll call them is dud resumes, the companies are going to see this, and when they go back into their applicant tracking system and see that dud resume and they compare it to your new resume, they may say, hey, we saw this guy the first time around and we passed on him, and even though we're seeing this now, this may not be the right person for us because we're seeing a little bit of inconsistency. So you really want to really set the tone right from the beginning and start applying once you've got a resume that has been perfected. It's free of spelling errors. It's been looked over by a couple people. A lot of, I should say all of the resumes that we do go through several different people to look at it just to verify the layout, the spelling. We've got our whole step-by-step process that we go through to make sure that your resume is ready to go and it's been perfected, because we know that once you start sending that out, you need to get those responses and get into a new position. So the next thing I'm going to talk about here is just some basics, but a lot of people really don't know this. And I'm going to put this on here. So your resume and your LinkedIn page really need to marry up. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, a LinkedIn page set up yet, you really need to get that set up, and you can go to another program that we offer. It's called LinkedIn Master Profile. I'm not going to go into that here right now, but your resume and your LinkedIn profile need to match, because what happens is whenever you send in your resume and it goes up over to the hiring manager and recruiter, let's say you get through, they're going to go onto your LinkedIn page and they're going to say, what does this person look like? They want to make sure that your resume and your LinkedIn page marry up with one another and cooperate so to speak, each other's story. And you want to make sure that they're the same. So let's say that you're applying to a position and your resume says product manager, for example. If the recruiter or the hiring manager is reading your resume and they go onto your LinkedIn profile and it says creative designer, well, that really doesn't equal. So you want to make sure that these are equal and they're representing the same story. Because what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for is consistency, trustworthiness, and someone who's highly credible. And if any of those don't check off at any point in the stage, then you're out. Because what every hiring manager and recruiter are looking to do is protect themselves from bringing somebody who shouldn't be coming into the company, inside the company. So they don't want that to happen. It's not a good reflection on them as a recruiter, or their decision making could end up costing them their position, in essence, if they do it too many times. So they're looking to weed people out as quickly as possible. This is one of the ways they do it. Also, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile and they're looking over your resume, that might be another discounter for them. They may say, listen, we can't find this guy on LinkedIn. He's got no social presence. We can't verify his credibility. They're not endorsing him. He's got no endorsements. We can't even find this guy anywhere. That may be one of those things that's an elimination factor for them. So make sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile marry up. So going into number 4, a lot of people say, well, what is it that you guys are going to do for me when it comes to my resume? And that's a great question. It's a very clean process that we go through. We'll sit down with you over the phone or Skype, and it's about 4 or 5 different times that we do this, but we need to understand where you want to go. We need to understand your whole background, where you've worked, where you've excelled, where your strengths lie. We also need to know what companies you want to target, what position you want to go for, and any other information you think would be pertinent to share with us. So once we have that, we'll sit there and structure your resume. We need to know about your accomplishments as well. So the accomplishments part is an important part of the resume. And a lot of people say, well, what do you mean by that? And I'll just write this up here. Sorry, it's starting to run on cursive. But your resume needs to be tailored to speak to your accomplishments. So when we sit there and we're doing bullet points on a job seeker's resume, what we'll do is we're throwing a lot of accomplishments into the resume. You really don't want to put responsibilities in the resume. I was responsible for overseeing a team of 6 people in our logistics department that did blah, 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 blah. That's nice, but that's not something that your hiring managers and recruiters really want to see. They want to know what you accomplished. What were your big accomplishments? And it really comes down to meat and potatoes. There's a lot of stuff that could be put on a resume, but it's also knowing what to leave off that's important as well. And too many candidates out there, and this is at many different levels, whether it's somebody out of college, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a vice president, a director, an engineer, an accountant. We speak to a lot of different people, and they'll say, well, I think we should include this in the resume. And we'll say, we appreciate you saying that and voicing this information and bringing this to us. Right now we've got these different accomplishments that you have, and this is what we really need to focus on for the positions that you want to go after, that you've told us that you want. So the resume really needs to be accomplishments based. If you're not talking about accomplishments, then you're really not speaking the language of hiring managers and recruiters and directors, because they want to know what have you accomplished. They want to know in an interview what challenges you've overcome, what challenges you've faced, what adversity you've had to overcome in teams. So those are the biggest things, especially in the resume. It's accomplishments. And they want to know, they want to see some demonstration of leadership. And so if you can accomplish that in a resume, it's going to help. So these are some basic things that I like to go over with people. A lot of people don't know this. This is a big gray area for many job seekers out there. And I just want to say that if you've been applying to jobs and you're not getting the phone calls or the emails to set up an interview, you need to get help with this, because it's going to take you too long to figure this out by yourself. And it's tough to do this by yourself. I speak with a lot of candidates. I'm very empathetic. Earlier on in my career, I had to go through this whole process personally. And it took me months when I was younger to master the resume and get in and start getting face-to-face with people. And then I was flying across the United States, both East and West Coast, to interview with people. So once you figure this out, it opens up a whole new door. And the initial part of the process is when you're just starting out, before you have the interviews, you have to get your resume right. This is what unlocks all the doors and gets you into companies, and it gets you interviewing. And then once you've got the interviews set up, you can focus more on interviewing. I still encourage candidates while they're interviewing to continue to send out their resume until you have that offer. Keep sending out the resume. And that's stuff from another program that we do called Ultimate Job Search, where we go into everything that it takes to land a position at every step. We go into interview, we do a little bit of resume, and there's a lot of different areas that we do in Ultimate Job Search, but I'm gonna really try to keep this focused to resume. Now, here's a concept, and I'm going to go into this, and it's really important. So it's what I call the golden thread. Now, when it comes to applying to any company, the resume is what I refer to as the golden thread. Now, maybe you haven't heard of this, maybe you know what I'm alluding to here, but the resume is always the golden thread throughout the entire hiring process. Now, what do I mean by that? When you first apply to a company, what opens the door to having and starting a conversation with a company is your resume, right? Well, once you get on the phone, what are they going to say to you? Tell me about yourself, right? So once they say, tell me about yourself, you're going to start really just reading down your resume, going down the list and saying, here's what I've done. I don't recommend always doing that. There's a favorite way that I like to start. I'm not going to go into that here, but you're going to start talking about the accomplishments that are on your resume. Then what happens? If you get the next interview, which is typically a phone call with the actual hiring manager, they're going to be looking at your resume. So in the initial phone call, they were looking at the resume. In the second phone call, they're looking at the resume. What happens if you get past the second phone call with the hiring manager? More than likely, they'll bring you in for an in-person interview. What's going to happen at that point? The hiring manager, there might be a couple of them, might be up to 3 of them. They'll be looking at your resume as well. They may bring you back for a second interview or perhaps even a third interview. Again, they're going to be looking at your resume and saying, who is this person? Let me, again, refresh my memory on what their qualifications are. So, again, you can see that the resume is the golden thread throughout this entire hiring process. When you're not speaking with them on the phone, when you're not physically there at their headquarters interviewing in person, they're looking at your resume. It is the number one thing that translates to your presence and who you are, and that's your face at their company. It's your resume. While you're not there, they're looking at your resume. That's That's who's standing in for you. So this is who you are, is your resume. Until you actually end up with a job there, they're going to be looking at your resume continuously. So again, you want to make sure that this is done right from the beginning. You don't want to get out there and start applying to a bunch of companies with a resume that's, all jacked up, that isn't speaking to your accomplishments, or that is in, not the best layout. So it's very important to have that resume looking key. Now, I'm going to go into number 8, and this is more than likely what I'm going to finish with. So if you have any questions, there's a number, it's either up above in the left or right hand corner. You can call us. If you're ready to sign up, you can sign up by clicking the link below. We don't have a ton of resume writers. I have a staff that, we've got a number of people who are dedicated to our resumes. We focus on serving only a certain number of candidates. And what we do is we create these resumes from scratch. It's a tremendous amount of work, and we really value what we do for people, and the time and energy that we put into doing these resumes. It takes a lot. And I just want to encourage you that if you're really serious about getting a great resume that's going to translate into you getting results, this is for you. And when you get your resume, you're really going to have to start sending this out and applying to companies. So there's work to do after we give you your resume. And that work is necessary to get you interviewing, to get it in front of people, to start launching your career and get the ball rolling. So if you think that once we give you your resume, everything's done, it's not. If you're not willing to do the work and get your resume out there in front of people through the different avenues like LinkedIn, Indeed, going to the corporate websites, and so on and so forth, then this really isn't for you. But if you're serious about getting a great resume, and people ask me, well, how long can I use this resume? You can use this for the rest of your career. Granted, you'll have to go in and change it as your positions change, and as you gain more experience, you'll have to go in there, and we give you this document in a Word file so you're able to do that. But you'll have to go in there and update it, but you can use this throughout your whole career. So the other thing is, people ask me, well, why do I recommend this so much? And A, because it's effective. B, because we've gotten people into great companies. You can read you can see the different companies. There's a few down there that we've thrown out there, and we don't like to advertise every company who we've gotten people into just for confidentiality's sake. Not everyone wants us to do that. Few people have given us permission to do it, which we're grateful for. But a lot of people say, I'm not sure, should I really do this? I'm on a budget, I'm in between a job. And what I share with them is this. Listen, if you go another 4 months looking for a job, or 6 months, or up to a year, the average is 4 to 6 months, but for some candidates it could take a year for them to find a position. Those are the statistics out there. But if you get an excellent resume in your hands that brands you to be a candidate of choice for any company, and it saves you 4 months in your job search, saves you 6 months, saves you 8 months, how much money are you going to save by being employed and getting your salary coming in? It's going to save you money, and it's going to save you time, because the more time that you're in between jobs, the less money you have coming in. So the idea is to get your resume, a great quality golden resume in your hand, and get you out there and get you into a company as quickly as possible. That's the goal. Now it does take time. You got to apply, you got to get out there, and then you've got to get in an interview. So you've got to do the work afterwards, but this is going to save you a significant amount of time. If you're wondering how much time it's going to save you, typically most candidates who we work with, it saves about 50 to 60% of the time that it takes normal candidates who are just trying to figure it out on their own. to get hired by a company. So another thing that we do with candidates who we sit down with, and we love to help people because we know that this isn't easy. It's just not. And I applaud you for just sitting down and taking the time to do this today. It shows that you're a committed person who's dedicated to improving your career, that you take your job search seriously. And I just want to commend you and applaud you for doing that. So I just want to finish with a couple things, and that is you can reach out to us by phone. You can also sign up in the link below. You can also reach us by the chat. If the link below is closed and there's a waiting list, you can sign up for it. We have to shut it down from time to time because we just get too many clients and we just can't do this for everybody. If we have 200 people or 300 people spill in over a long weekend, a holiday weekend or something like that, we can't control that type of volume and service all those people at one time. So if you see it closed, sign up and we'll get back to you. And I would encourage you to call in and find out, if a spot has opened up, and we'll get you the help that you need to get your job and get the career that you want, the position that you want. So keep an eye on that. You've got all these notes. You can go back and go through this video again. And again, I would just tell you that we've spoken with so many Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 VPs and directors. We know what they're looking for. And, initially years ago, we had to go through that kind of trial and error. The benefit that we've had is that we've been fortunate enough to talk to so many different people at so many incredible companies, from Anheuser-Busch to Express Scripts to Energizer to there's just so many of them that we've had the chance to speak with. Babies R Us, Toys R Us Corporation, Enterprise, Rent-A-Car Company, billion-dollar companies, and as well as your Facebooks and your Googles. And we know what they're looking for, and we've gone through trial and error over the years. And we've done the split testing with different resumes, and we know the ones that resonate with people, the layouts that resonate with people. We've seen the resumes that have gotten people in the doors with each one of these companies. So we've got, and I'll finish with this, we've got the model for success. And you have to model what successful people are doing to get into these companies if you're going to do the same. This might just be the most important thing that I've touched on in this whole program right now, is you have to model somebody who's gotten the successful results, who knows the recipe to get in. And that's not only in the resume stage, but it's also the interview stage when it comes to answering your questions in the interview, when it comes to asking questions at the end of the interview. If you model people who have been successful, that's what Tony Robbins says. If you model success, you too will be successful. Find someone who's getting the result that you want and copy and duplicate that until you get that same result. If you don't know who Tony Robbins is, he's a New York Times best-selling author. He's a man who owns companies that produce $8 billion in revenues annually, and he's a coach to many CEOs. He's a performance coach. A lot of people know Tony Robbins as a great motivational speaker, but he's also an incredible businessman. And what he's been able to do is be successful by modeling successful people. So if you can find, that's what we've done here at Hired&Co, especially with all of our programs, is we model people who have been successful. So whether it's the resume, whether it's the interview process, this is really one of the keys to success, is modeling success and aligning yourself with successful people. And that's a big part of what we've done to really get the best information at Hired&Co, is we've talked to so many people out there who are in high places at all these companies to find out what they're looking for, what they did to get into the company themselves, who the company is looking for today, What's the common denominator on people getting hired there? What are you guys looking for specifically at Google in your resume? What are you specifically looking at Facebook, in your candidates' resumes? What are you wanting to see? So we've gotten the answers to all of that. And what we're helping our candidates, our job seekers who come to us and they want our help, is we help them to model success. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. You know how to reach us. Again, you can call the phone number up above. You can sign up by clicking the link below if it's open. And I just encourage you to press on. I know that this is a challenging time for a lot of people finding a new job. It's a time of uncertainty, and we help bring a lot of confidence into people who we work with through this whole process that we take them through with the resume. So if you sign up below, click the link, what will happen is you'll get enrolled into our resume program. We'll start making a resume for you, and what we do is you'll get a phone call from your resume writer. They'll have a phone call which starts off at an hour long, and what they do is they sit down, they get your whole background. They want to find out where you want to go, what companies you want to be at, who you're targeting. They want to find out where you're at, what your resume looks like right now, if you have one. If you don't, that's fine too. And they just go through that whole process with you, and it's multiple phone calls that you'll do. It's a very thorough process that we do, so I just want to set the tone for that from the beginning. But I want to just thank you for taking the time to do this. It says a lot about you as a person to invest time in building your career and aligning yourselves with people who can help you do that. So I encourage you to get as much help as you can throughout your career, not only in your resume, but when it comes to actually getting inside a company, you'll also need to find mentors, find people to help you solve problems. To get to a new position in your company, you'll probably need a mentor. So don't let this be the first and the only time you reach out to somebody for help, but make it a consistent habit, because most people who are really successful in their careers, they're continuously asking people for help. And that's what you want to do. Not every day of the week do you want to do something like that, but once a month or maybe once every 45 days is reach out to somebody, say, hey, I need some help with this. And that's the part of being a serious professional who takes your career seriously. So I hope that this has been really helpful to you, and it gives you a framework and a mindset on where you need to operate from. You know how to reach us. The phone number's up here. You can sign up below. We'll get you started today, and I wish you the best of luck in your career search.